My name is Ryan Matthews, 35 years old. I work as a project manager for a tech company in Austin, Texas. My wife, Jessica, is 32, a bubbly kindergarten teacher known for her warm smile and infectious laughter. We've been together for 10 years, married for 6, and we share a beautiful son, Ethan, who's almost 3. I thought we had the perfect family, or at least, I did until last week. Last Saturday, I was in our bedroom cleaning out old drawers, trying to make room for some of Ethan's baby clothes Jessica insisted we save for sentimental reasons. I stumbled across an old, forgotten iPad that had been tucked away in the back of the nightstand. I almost didn't turn it on, but curiosity got the better of me. The moment the screen lit up, my world began to crumble. There were messages, thousands of them. Jessica had forgotten to log out of her iMessage account. The text between her and a contact saved under the name Joe Jim. At first, I thought it was one of her fitness instructors, but as I scrolled, my stomach tightened into knots. It was way more than workout tips or motivational quotes. The first line that jumped out at me was, "I can still feel your nails on my back from last night. Can't wait to see you again, babe." It hit me like a freight train. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands trembled as I kept scrolling. The timestamp showed these conversations stretched back nearly 2 years. Explicit messages, photos, plans for secret getaways, and then came the dagger, "Happy Mother's Day, babe. Can't believe we snuck that in before you had to be with Ryan and the kid. You're amazing." Mother's Day of 2022. While I had taken Ethan to the park to make breakfast in bed for Jessica, she was apparently with him. Joe, her affair partner, wasn't some random guy from the gym. It turned out he was Joe Sanders, 38, a real estate agent and married father of 2. My hands were shaking as I dug deeper. Not only had she been unfaithful, but she was spending holidays meant for our family sneaking around with Joe. The confrontation. By the time Jessica got home from her grocery run, I was sitting in the living room with the iPad on the coffee table. Ethan was with my mom for the weekend, so we were alone. She walked in with her bright smile, carrying 2 bags of groceries. "Hey, babe, I got the stuff for Ethan's favorite spaghetti," she chirped. I didn't say a word. The silence made her pause. She set the bags down slowly and glanced at the iPad. Her face went pale. "Ryan, you want to explain this?" I spat, gesturing to the screen. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I can explain." "Explain what, Jessica?" "That you've been screwing another man for 2 years? That you spent Mother's Day in some motel while I was with our son?" My voice cracked, and I hated how vulnerable I sounded, but the pain was unbearable. "Ryan, please, it wasn't like that." She started to cry. The audacity of her tears made my blood boil. "Don't you dare cry right now," I growled. "You don't get to cry." She fell to her knees, begging, sobbing, trying to grab my hands, but I pulled away. "It didn't mean anything," she blubbered. "It was a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake." 2 years? 2 years of mistakes, Jessica? That's not a mistake, that's a lifestyle. She kept begging, promising me she'd ended, that it had already ended months ago. But the text said otherwise, texts as recent as 3 days ago, where they were discussing meeting up again. "Is this why you suddenly needed those girls' nights out?" I demanded. "Yes," she whispered. "Unbelievable." I laughed bitterly. "And Joe, does his wife know?" She looked up at me, her face a mess of mascara-streaked tears. "No, please, Ryan, don't tell her. It'll destroy their family." I couldn't believe her nerve. Destroy their family? What about ours? The drama unfolds. I kicked her out of the house that night. She begged to stay, said she had nowhere to go, but I didn't care. She packed a bag and went to her sister's place. The next morning, I started digging deeper into Joe Sanders. Social media, LinkedIn, his company website. I wanted to know everything. His wife, Laura, 36, was a stay-at-home mom to their 2 kids, a boy and a girl. They looked like the picture-perfect family. But here's where things got even worse. I found out Joe had been lying to Jessica too. He wasn't just some guy who had fallen in love with her. He was a serial cheater. There were other women, at least 2, based on what I could piece together from his social media activity and a few cryptic comments left by other women on his posts. The man who had blown up my life wasn't even exclusive in his betrayal. I debated for hours whether to contact Laura. Part of me felt like it wasn't my place, but another part, the part that was angry and shattered, wanted her to know exactly who her husband was. The final nail in the coffin? Jessica admitted during another conversation that Joe had been in our home. She didn't say when, but the thought of him being in my house, near my son, made me sick. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, scrolling through lawyer websites, trying to figure out my next move. Divorce? Custody? Would I lose Ethan because she could play the I'm his mother card? I wasn't just heartbroken, I was enraged. And I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. I spent the next day in a fog of anger and disbelief. Jessica was gone, but the house still reeked of her presence, the family photos on the walls, her perfume lingering on the couch cushions, Ethan's giggles in old videos we'd recorded together. Every memory felt tainted now, but I wasn't just sitting around wallowing. I'd already scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney, who advised me to gather as much evidence as possible before making any major moves. That's when I decided to dig deeper into the messages between Jessica and Joe. As I scrolled through the texts for what felt like the 100th time, a particular thread caught my eye. It wasn't explicit like the others. In fact, it seemed more calculated. Joe, don't forget. Jess, keep your story straight. We don't want Ryan sniffing around and ruining things. Jessica, I know. He's not suspicious. Stop worrying. My heart stopped. Story straight? Ruining what? The messages didn't make sense at first, but as I kept scrolling, a horrifying picture began to emerge. It wasn't just an affair, they were scheming. Joe had convinced Jessica to siphon money from our joint savings account over the past 2 years. Small amounts at first, $100 here, $200 there, but by the time I checked our bank statements, the total was staggering. Nearly $30,000 had vanished. And that's when the real bombshell dropped. The twist, buried in the messages, was a single screenshot from Jessica's phone, a copy of my life insurance policy. Joe had texted her just saying, if anything ever happens to Ryan, we'd be set for life. Imagine the possibilities. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just an affair, this was premeditated. They'd been discussing my death. The texts didn't outright say they were planning to kill me, but the implications were clear enough to make my stomach churn. Joe was planting seeds in Jessica's mind, manipulating her into seeing me as an obstacle to their happily ever after. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen, trying to process what I'd just uncovered. Was this why she stayed with me for 2 years while carrying on with Joe? Was she waiting for the right moment to make her move? I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there in front of me. The confrontation round 2. I couldn't let this slide. That night, I called Jessica. Ryan, I told you I'm sorry, she began the moment she picked up. I'll do anything to fix this. Shut up, I interrupted, my voice ice cold. I know about the money, and I know about the life insurance policy. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Ryan, it's not what you think. Then what is it, Jessica? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and your boyfriend were planning to screw me over, literally and figuratively. It wasn't like that, she said, her voice shaking. Joe is a manipulator. He pressured me into everything. The money, the texts about your policy. I never agreed to anything like that, Ryan, I swear. Do you think that makes it better? I roared. You betrayed me, stole from me, and entertained the idea of me being out of the picture so you could play house with that bastard. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she sobbed. I was in a dark place. Save it. You're not the victim here, Jessica. Not anymore. I hung up before she could say another word. Telling Joe's wife. That same night, I made a decision: Laura deserved to know the truth. I tracked her down on social media and sent her a message. Hi Laura, my name is Ryan Matthews. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I believe your husband, Joe, has been having an affair with my wife, Jessica. I've attached some screenshots as proof. Please feel free to reach out if you'd like to discuss this further. I hesitated before hitting send. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about doing the right thing. She needed to know who she was married to. Within an hour, my phone buzzed. It was Laura. Her voice was quiet but firm. Ryan, thank you for telling me. I had my suspicions, but I didn't want to believe it. There's more, I said grimly. I told her about the stolen money and the texts about my life insurance policy. She was silent for a long time before finally saying, I'm not surprised. Joe's done things like this before: lied, cheated, manipulated. I just never thought it would go this far. We agreed to stay in touch and share any new information we uncovered. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had an ally. The plan begins to form. After that conversation, I knew I couldn't just let Jessica and Joe walk away unscathed. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore, it was about justice. I contacted my attorney the next morning, laying everything out: the affair, the stolen money, the life insurance texts. He assured me we had a strong case for divorce, and possibly even criminal charges if we could prove their intent. But I wasn't done yet. If Joe and Jessica thought they could destroy my life and get away with it, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. When I woke up the next morning, I didn't feel like the same person. Something in me had shifted. The betrayal, the lies, the threats against my life, they had broken me, but not in the way Jessica and Joe probably hoped. I wasn't some meek, helpless guy they could walk all over. No, I was going to hit back. Hard. This wasn't just about exposing them anymore, it was about dismantling every piece of their carefully constructed fantasy world. If they thought they could have a happily ever after at my expense, they were about to find out how wrong they were. Step 1: Gathering allies. The first thing I did was call Laura. Laura, I said, I think it's time we take them down together. She didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. Over the next few days, we swapped notes, screenshots, and every piece of dirt we could dig up on Joe and Jessica. Laura even managed to find out that Joe had been using a fake consulting business as a front to funnel some of the stolen money. Together, we were like two detectives piecing together a crime scene, and the deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Step 2: The financial trap. With my lawyer's help, I froze our joint bank account to stop any further withdrawals. Jessica had no idea until her card was declined at the grocery store. She called me, furious. What the hell, Ryan? Why can't I access the account? Because you've already stolen enough from me, I said calmly. You don't get another cent. You can't do this, she screamed. Oh, but I can, I replied. And I did. Good luck explaining this to Joe. I could almost hear her seething through the phone. Step 3: Public humiliation. Next, Laura and I decided to go public. Laura posted an anonymous story on a popular local Facebook group, outlining Joe's affair and financial schemes without naming names. I did the same, targeting a community page where Jessica's co-workers and friends were active. We didn't mention them outright, just enough details for people who knew them to connect the dots. The posts blew up within hours. Texts and calls flooded Jessica's phone, and I'm sure Joe wasn't faring any better. The whispers turned into outright confrontations when Jessica went to work the next day. She came home furious, banging on my door. Ryan, open the door, she screamed. What the hell did you do? I opened it just enough to lean against the frame. Just telling the truth, Jess. You should try it sometime. Her face turned red. You're ruining my life. Funny, I said. That's exactly what you tried to do to me. Step 4: The legal bombshell. The pièce de résistance came a week later. With my lawyer's help, I filed for divorce, citing infidelity and financial misconduct. Jessica was served the papers at work because why not add a little more spice to the humiliation? Laura, meanwhile, had filed for divorce from Joe and was also pressing charges for financial fraud. I couldn't have planned it better if I tried. The fallout was spectacular. Joe called me in a panic the next day. Ryan, listen, he started, his voice shaky. You don't have to do this. Let's talk man to man. Man to man? I laughed bitterly. You're not a man, Joe. You're a coward who seduces married women and steals from their families. There's nothing to talk about. He tried again. Look, I'll pay you back, okay? Whatever you lost, I'll make it right. You think this is about money? I snapped. You plan to destroy my life. Now I'm just returning the favor. I hung up and blocked his number. Step 5: The grand finale. The final piece of the plan came into play when Laura and I pulled our evidence and went to the police. While the texts about my life insurance weren't enough to prove intent to harm, the financial fraud and theft were more than enough to open an investigation. Within weeks, Joe was arrested, and Jessica was subpoenaed as part of the case. Watching her panic as the reality of her situation sank in was oddly satisfying, setting the stage for the revenge. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one last move to make, a final play that would ensure neither of them could ever rebuild their lives at my expense. It was time to go nuclear. The time had come. Every piece of the plan was in place, and the fallout was about to rain down on Jessica and Joe like a Category 5 hurricane. I stood outside the courthouse with Laura on the morning of Joe's arraignment, both of us sipping coffee like two conspirators enjoying the calm before the storm. You ready for this? She asked. More than you know, I replied. The courthouse was already buzzing with reporters. Laura had made sure the story of Joe's financial fraud reached the press. Of course, the reporters didn't know the full scope yet, not about the affair, not about the betrayal, but they'd find out soon enough. The public spectacle. Joe showed up first, escorted by his lawyer. He looked disheveled and terrified, the kind of man who knew his world was collapsing but had no way to stop it. Jessica arrived shortly after, looking just as rattled. She tried to meet my eyes, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. As they entered the courthouse, Laura leaned over and whispered, "You're going to love what happens next." The prosecution had added an unexpected twist to their case, a motion to publicly disclose Joe's financial dealings, including his use of funds to sustain an extramarital affair. It was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. As the courtroom proceedings began, the prosecutor wasted no time laying it all out. Mr. Joseph Carter embezzled nearly $200,000 from company accounts over a period of 2 years. These funds were used to fund a lavish lifestyle, including gifts, vacations, and an extramarital affair with Mrs. Jessica Taylor, the wife of Ryan Taylor, who is present in court today. The room erupted into gasps and murmurs. Jessica's face turned a deep shade of crimson. Joe looked like he might faint. But that wasn't the best part. The surprise witness. The prosecution called their next witness, me. As I took the stand, I could feel Jessica's and Joe's eyes boring into me, but I kept my composure. "Mr. Taylor," the prosecutor began, "can you describe how you became aware of this affair and the financial misconduct?" I laid it all out: the fake consulting business, the suspicious behavior, the texts I'd found, and the day I'd caught them red-handed. I even brought up the life insurance texts, just to drive the knife in a little deeper. When I finished, the room was silent. The judge stared at Joe and Jessica like they were the lowest form of life he'd ever encountered. Jessica's breakdown. As the proceedings continued, Jessica's composure cracked. "You don't understand," she blurted out, standing up in the middle of the courtroom. "Joe promised me he'd leave his wife for me. He said we'd have a future together." "Mrs. Taylor, sit down," the judge snapped. But she wasn't done. "Ryan, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You have to believe me." I didn't even look at her. Laura, sitting in the gallery, smirked. "Classic," she whispered. The final blow. After the court session, I walked out of the courthouse into a sea of reporters. Laura and I exchanged a glance, and I nodded. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. "I'd like to make a statement," I said, stepping up to the microphones. The reporters quieted down, their pens and cameras ready. "My name is Ryan Taylor," I began, "and for 2 years, my wife Jessica Taylor carried on an affair with Joseph Carter, all while they stole from our families and lied to everyone around them. Today, justice is finally being served." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "But this isn't just about me. It's about standing up for yourself when people betray you. To anyone out there who's been wronged, know this: you don't have to take it lying down." The crowd erupted into questions, but I walked away without answering. Joe's arrest and Jessica's public shaming. Joe was taken into custody immediately after the court session. Watching him being led away in handcuffs was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. Jessica, meanwhile, faced her own brand of justice. The public humiliation, the loss of her reputation, the whispers and stares. She couldn't go anywhere without feeling the weight of her actions. And that was before I sent copies of all the evidence to her employer. Let's just say Jessica wouldn't be earning a paycheck anytime soon. The sweetest revenge. The final touch was the delivery of divorce papers. I made sure they were served to her during one of her rare public outings. The look on her face as she opened the envelope, surrounded by people who knew exactly what she'd done, was priceless. "Good luck, Jessica," I said when she called me, sobbing. "You're going to need it. It's been a few months since everything came crashing down. The dust has finally settled, and life is, in some ways, beginning again. But there are moments, brief flashes, when everything feels like a weight I can't escape." The fallout. Jessica's life spiraled into chaos. The divorce was finalized within weeks. She'd lost her job, her reputation, and her credibility. The affair had become public knowledge, and the smear campaign she'd hoped to avoid had followed her every step. Even her family had distanced themselves. I didn't have to lift a finger for any of it. But the one thing that didn't change was her desperation to regain control. Jessica's phone calls became more frequent, each one more pleading than the last. She wanted to fix things, to explain, to make everything go back to some semblance of normalcy. "I'm sorry, Ryan," she cried one night, the sound of her voice strangely empty now. "I made a mistake. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't bring myself to respond." She had lost her chance at any empathy from me long ago. Joe's sentence. Joe, meanwhile, had been sentenced to 3 years of probation for his financial crimes. But that wasn't enough. His reputation, like Jessica's, was in tatters. Word got out about his affair and the role he played in breaking up my family. When his ex-wife found out, it was like opening a dam. The betrayal flooded their entire marriage. He lost everything: his friends, his family, and most painfully, his self-respect. The whispers never stopped. Joe wasn't a man anymore. He was the guy who ruined lives for a couple of years of stolen pleasure. The silence. I rarely hear from Laura now. The plan we executed, the one we spent sleepless nights constructing, had played out to perfection, and as much as I wanted to celebrate, as much as I wanted to gloat about how I had ruined their lives in return, I couldn't. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, there was this hollow feeling that stayed with me. Maybe it was the loss of my marriage or the cold reality that no matter how much vengeance I got, my family was forever broken. The healing process. There was only one thing keeping me grounded through it all: my son, Daniel. 3 years old, full of life, always asking questions, and smiling like he knew nothing about the storm that had destroyed everything around him. He didn't deserve any of it. He was just a kid. I knew I had to be the one to heal, not just for myself, but for him. Slowly, with the help of therapy, I started putting the pieces of my life back together. I had a long road ahead of me, but the road felt less impossible than before. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It wasn't about destroying the people who had wronged me. It was about rebuilding the trust I had lost, first in myself, then with my son, and maybe, someday, with the world. The final word. I still have moments when it hits me all over again, the sting of betrayal, the feelings of anger, of being replaced, of being nothing more than a pawn in someone else's selfish game. But with time, those moments get further apart. I'm not saying I'm healed. I'm not even saying I'm okay. But I am better, and better feels good. As for Jessica, well, her calls have become less frequent. Maybe she's starting to realize that she won't get the chance to manipulate me again. But if she's learned anything from this mess, it's that you can destroy a man's trust, you can tear apart his life, but you can never take his dignity. And that's the lesson I'll carry with me, no matter how far this journey takes me.